The first thing Nathan Cole noticed was the trembling in the waitress' hands, the way they hovered in the air as if afraid to exist, and in that instant something old and sharp twisted inside his chest, because he had seen those hands before in another life he tried not to remember. The restaurant was quiet in the polite, expensive way, white tablecloths and low music, his mother seated across from him with her gentle smile and unhearing ears, and suddenly the young woman standing there began moving her fingers with a careful grace that made time feel slow and heavy. What if this happened to you, when a stranger unexpectedly touched the most private corner of your life, the place you kept hidden because it hurt too much to explain? If you were in this moment, would you turn away, or would you let yourself feel everything you had buried? Hannah Brooks had learned to disappear early in life, to fold herself into small shapes that wouldn't invite attention or questions. Growing up in a cramped apartment outside Columbus, Ohio, she worked double shifts to keep the lights on after her father's illness hollowed out their savings, and she learned American Sign Language from a neighbor whose husband had been deaf, practicing late at night with aching eyes and hands stiff from carrying trays all day. It wasn't a dream that paid bills, but it was a skill that felt like purpose, a way to reach people locked behind silence. When she saw the older woman at Nathan's table, the slight tilt of the head, the distant focus of the eyes, Hannah felt the pull of instinct stronger than fear, and she signed softly, not to impress, not to be seen, but because it felt wrong to let kindness pass by unused. Eleanor Cole's face transformed as she watched the young waitress' hands, eyes filling with light that made her seem suddenly younger, and her shoulders relaxed, as if a weight she had carried for decades finally slipped free. Deafness had followed her since childhood, a companion that shaped every relationship, every room she entered, and though her son loved her fiercely, the world often felt like a place she observed from behind glass. Now, in the middle of a polished restaurant in New York City, a stranger spoke to her in the language of her heart, and Eleanor reached out, her touch brief but filled with gratitude that needed no sound. It was a simple exchange, almost invisible to others, but it cracked something open that had been sealed tight for years. Nathan had built an empire from ambition and discipline, the kind of billionaire whose name appeared on buildings and headlines, but none of that prepared him for the flood of memory that surged through him as he watched Hannah sign. He remembered being a boy, sitting beside his mother at church in rural Pennsylvania, watching her smile politely while conversations flowed around her without pause, remembered the fury and helplessness that hardened him early, driving him to succeed so he could shield her from a world that forgot to slow down. He had learned to see people as problems to solve, obstacles to overcome, but now his chest burned with a feeling he couldn't buy or control. What choice would you make if you realized too late that your strength had cost you your softness, that your success had been built on walls instead of bridges? Hannah sensed his stare and felt her confidence falter, old shame rising like a tide, the familiar fear of having crossed an invisible line. She finished signing, offered a small nod, and retreated toward the kitchen, heart pounding as she told herself she had only done what felt right. She didn't see Nathan rise from his chair, didn't hear the hush that followed him as he crossed the room, and when he reached her, she braced for reprimand or dismissal, the consequences she had learned to expect from life. Instead, she felt the weight of his attention shift from scrutiny to something raw and unguarded, his eyes wet with emotion he did not try to hide. In that moment, the polished narrative of Nathan Cole's life unraveled, replaced by a truth he could no longer ignore, that power meant nothing without compassion, that wealth could not replace the simple dignity of being understood. He looked at Hannah and saw not an employee but a mirror of his mother's quiet resilience, of his own lost humanity, and he understood how easily the world crushed people who gave without expecting return. The room seemed to breathe with him. As he reached for his mother's hand, the three of them connected by a language of movement and feeling that needed no sound, and tears traced down his face without shame, because sometimes strength was finally letting yourself be seen. The days that followed carried a quiet transformation that no press release could capture. Nathan ensured Hannah's education in interpretation was fully supported, not as charity but as recognition of value, and he began funding community programs that taught sign language in public spaces, determined that fewer people would feel invisible in crowded rooms. Hannah, still shy but steadier now, found her life expanding in ways she never imagined, her hands no longer trembling as she helped others bridge gaps of silence. Eleanor watched it all with a smile that held both sorrow and hope, knowing that one small act of kindness had shifted the course of many lives, including her son's. As the story settles in your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments and tell us how this moment made you feel or what you would have done in Hannah's place. If this story truly touched your heart, gently consider liking, commenting, sharing it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribing for more stories that remind us of the quiet power of kindness and second chances.